Good day folks, welcome to MUN Botanical Garden. Today we're going to take a little walk and talk through the garden, and seeing I have you here, I'm going to tell you one of the best kept secrets in St. John's. Here it is. For 25 years people have been telling me, oh, the Botanical Garden, I've never been up there, I've lived here all my life. Well, it's time you came up and had a look. There's been some interesting new developments in the last couple of years, so if you'd like to follow me through the garden now, we can all have a look. This is our perennial border where we grow about 80 different varieties of perennials. It's been a real good summer for growing as long as you can keep a drop of water on the stuff. You can see some things like the summer phlox here is just coming into bloom. The monarda and the borage is in full bloom. Some monkshood at the back here just coming into bloom. Shasta daisies are looking nice. You can see a wide range of colors, heights and textures, and this is what you aim for in a perennial border. You don't want to have all your yellow plants blooming in May, you want to try and get a range of colors, heights and textures over the whole season. And we generally divide it up into early, mid and late flowers. So this is your mid-season stuff that's blooming here now. We've got some landsleeve goldenrod growing in the back of the border here. People always say that's a weed that grows in the ditches. Really good plant for the red admiral butterflies. So that's one reason why we grow those around the garden. Okay. Another plant we have here is the Maltese cross, and you can see this one's getting a little bit past its prime now. So what we do when they reach this state of development, you hold out your handy secateurs here and we perform this little operation known as deadheading. So we're going to cut off all these seed heads before they go to seed, because that takes a lot of energy out of the plant. And I always say to people, it's like letting your plants go to seed is like having a bunch of youngsters. It just takes the good right out of you. So deadhead your plants. All that energy that would be used in producing seeds that we don't necessarily want will go back into the overall vigor of the plant. Okay, moving along here now, we have some phlox here that's not into bloom, and here's a real nice plant, bit rough textured for some people, but I like it. It's the Filipendula rubra magnifica, or Queen of the Prairie, and we just divided it this spring. Usually that plant would be over 6 feet tall now, but it's blooming now. I'm sure it'll be up to its regular height next year. Some new little perennials poked here in the front of the garden. Stilbe's just coming into bloom. Got your red Maltese cross and your white Maltese cross, and some yellow loosestrife just about ready to get into the deadheading stage. And that brings us pretty well to the end of our perennial border. We've moved into our shade garden now, and these are all plants that are shade tolerant. That doesn't mean they won't grow in sun, it means they will grow in shade. And you can see there's a lot of hostas, which is probably the #1 shade plant for Newfoundland, and a bunch of ferns, stilbes, impatiens. Just again, there's about 100 different perennials in this little area we're looking at now. Just moving along by the field center now, you can see our window boxes here and our hanging baskets. And there's a new little thing we're doing this year. This is a trial garden. These are all plants that are new to the industry, and they were sent to us by the breeders. And we've grown these plants, and we're going to assess them throughout the growing season and send our report back to them. And also we're having an industry day here where members of the landscape gardening industry can visit the garden, look at all these new plants and actually vote for their favorites. Exiting the back of the field centre now. We'll walk along. This is our medicinal garden here on my right. Looks like a garden of weeds. That's because many of them are, but they all have some type of medicinal or herbal qualities. And we display them, but we don't encourage people to go picking stuff and making tea out of it. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble that way. Just come in and look at them, and then you can read up on them yourself. This is our newest bed we've done at the garden. This is our Asian garden, and it was just planted this year about 3 weeks ago, and these plants are all from the continent of Asia. And if you want to come in and look at it now and come back next year and look at it, you'll see a big difference. Very immature planting at this point. This little garden here we put in about 10 years ago. We call it the White Garden, and it's not named after me. It's because the flower color of just about every plant in there is white. Many of them have finished blooming, have been deadheaded already. Again, we're inside the shade garden now, just a different view. A lot of primulas, some wild ginger, hostas, astilbes. Okay. We've just come down the main trail, and now we're going to take a turn into the what we call the cultivated area of the garden. And our first garden is going to be the cottage garden, which is a nice little sheltered little hideaway, and it was designed to resemble old-time English cottage gardens. So this is a garden like someone would have at home, not necessarily in a botanical garden. And the massings, the groupings of the plants, and everything is all kind of growing together. It sounds like an excuse, but that's actually the way we want it. And if there's a weed growing up somewhere, that's also probably left by design, because we're trying to replicate, you know, what a couple probably would have in their own garden. Too many plants to name. There's a mixture of shrubs and herbaceous perennials. You can see we've got on the trellis here, we've got a couple of different vines. There's a grapevine and a American bittersweet growing on there. And we've just let them all sort of tangle together. Very sheltered garden, and we don't use as many stakes and strings and tree support or plant supports in here as we would in the perennial border, because it's much more sheltered. Just exiting the cottage garden now, and we're into the rock garden, which is, I have to say, my favorite part of the garden. There's 200 tons of rocks and about 80 tons of mixed soil put into this garden. And you look at it, you might say, well, it's all rock, but it's not. All these, you see all these shrubs and plants growing. There's pockets of soil a foot or 2 feet deep there, and what you see on the surface is a rock mulch. There's our little eyebrow bridge with a little stream and waterfall. Of all the things I've done at the garden, this stream was the hardest, because water is like fire. It takes the path of least resistance. It goes where it wants to, not necessarily where you want it to go. This is our limestone rock garden, and if you look at the rocks, you can see the streaks of limestone through them. So this is a very alkaline garden, or a sweet soil. Whereas right across the path here, these are all rhododendrons, all members of the Ericaceae family, which are acid-loving plants. So that's a sour soil. So you've got the sweet and sour here together. The Ericaceous border here was planted in 1989. There's about 75 different rhododendrons in here, and they were all about a foot high when they were planted. So you can see over the last 20 odd years they've really done well. We grow almost 200 varieties of rhododendron growing outside in the garden now. And people ask me, do I use winter protection on them? And I'd say, well, I used to when we only had 25 or 30, but not with 200.
What do you mean by winter protection?
Well, we'd you know, wrap them up, put teepees over them, put burlap on them, that sort of thing. Okay, I guess we have to go down this way too, seeing it's the my favorite spot in the garden. There's the limestone scree here, and a scree is, you know, if you look at the side of a mountain, all the rocks that, you know, break off and tumble down, and they form this sort of a talus slope or scree at the bottom. So that's so what this is representative of. And anything we grow in there is very deep rooted, because it has to get down through all that scree, all that broken rubble, before it can reach the soil. So we got a couple of goldfish in there, and believe it or not, they survive in that pool all winter long. But it's a lot deeper than it looks. It's about 4 feet deep. I know, because I dug it and I've fallen in it since. So this is what we tend to call the new section of the rock garden, because it was built in about 95. This is the Alpine House, and this is a little one of our changeable exhibits. As the plants come into bloom, they're all in pots. They're brought over here and placed in the Alpine House, and once they finish flowering, they're taken out and something else is put back in its place. And it's with the raised benches, it's a great place to for photographers, and also blooming tends to be extended a little bit in this house, because of course you're not getting the direct sun on them, and of course if you get a heavy rain, the petals aren't being washed off the plants. We're looking at our Newfoundland Heritage Garden now, and we call it that because these plants have all been recorded as being in Newfoundland since before the Second World War. And I don't mean a plant like this. These are pieces of the actual plants. We got them from old graveyards. People donated them and various means, but we have the histories of all these plants, some of them going back 200 or 300 years. And it's when people come to the garden and say, I don't know much about gardening, I like to grow some perennials, what are some that are hardy and easy to grow? Well, I'll tell them anything in this garden. These are seasoned veterans of many campaigns. They're tough and hardy, and basically if you can't grow the plants in this garden, get yourself another hobby, because they're very tough and very easy. This plant right here, for instance, this a man, Roy Decker, donated this to me. He's my brother's father-in-law. He's passed on now. I think he lived to be about 94. He gave me a piece of this plant, and he showed me a picture of him standing in front of this plant up in Cape Onion up on the Great Northern, and he's about 3 years old. So, I mean, I'd say that this particular plant is probably 150 or more years old. So obviously a great plant, a little bit past its prime now, and we'll be deadheading that in the next few days. So pretty well all perennials in here, with the odd annual mixed in just for a little to fill in space or for a little color. And some things have finished blooming and have already been cut down for the year. This is another interesting shrub everybody always takes a smell of when they're here. This is boy's love, and it gets its name from Actually, my mother told me when she was a young girl out around the bay, they didn't have perfume or anything, so they get a little sprig of that and wear it behind their ear when they're going out with the boys. So that's where it gets its name. And that's our Newfoundland Heritage Garden. On the other side of the path here we have our old rock garden. I call it the old rock garden because it's been here longer than me, so it must be old. It's typical rock garden style, a west or south facing bank, and as you can see it's all been built up with little terraces and a little footpath, so you form these little sort of pockets that you can grow things in. And the difference between this rock garden and the one we just looked at is this one's much older and the rocks are much smaller. The rocks were placed in this one by hand, where it was heavy equipment like a backhoe and a front end loader that would have placed the rocks for the newer rock garden. We'll take a little walk down through the peat beds. Again, this is a lot of rhododendrons down here. We have a lot of rhododendrons because they grow very well here. Our soil conditions and our climate suits them quite well. A lot of native plants down here. This is we call them the peat beds because there's no actual mineral soil underneath these plants. It's all peat moss, leaf mold, and sand. So no mineral soil, and a lot of these plants you'll see growing in Newfoundland out on the bog, as they say. And it's a good garden for another reason, is that you don't have to dig it and lime it and fertilize it in the spring as we do with the perennial beds. So a little bit of top dressing of peat and leaf mold, some weeding, and a little bit of pruning now and then, but this is a garden that stands on its own, probably more so than any of the other ones. We're moving out of the peat beds now into the woodland bed, so we're back into our mineral-based soil here again. And the woodland bed, because it is surrounded by trees, and a lot of these plants you'll see are people often ask, is that a native plant? And I said, well, yes, it's native somewhere, not necessarily here. Move on down, you can see the Pedicutes japonica here, the biggest leaf plant that I've ever seen in Newfoundland. Kids get a big kick out of them.
Slugs are getting that thing.
Yep, the slugs love them.
Yeah.
But the way I look at that, if they want to eat that and leave everything else alone, then there's a sacrificial lamb. And it's a bit shadier and damper down here, so you're going to see more slug activity down here. Slugs haven't been bad this year because it's been so dry, but there's a lot of caterpillars around. There's a lot of stuff being chewed up. Again, when you get the good weather, the bugs like the good weather just like we do. We're moving down into a little area here now where if we lost between here and the pond, which you can probably just see down to the woods there. With Hurricane Igor, we lost 200 trees between here and the pond. And it took us a month to cut them off the trails. We'll head back up this way now. There's a little shrub border we've been developing over the last few years. We've got a blue spruce there, and believe me, I didn't prune it that way. That's Mr. Moose job, which is when you have a botanical garden and a nature reserve right in the middle of the woods, we do have some, we have had some moose problems in the past. Here's one of our newer features. It's called the crevice garden, and again it's a rock garden, and there's soil put in between all these rocks. But it's a new style of rock gardening. We built it about 3 years ago, and it was planted, and everything is just doing great. And it's the public like to see something new, so this is a nice new little feature. Some of the things probably are a little bit big for this style, but we tried them anyway, so it'll get developed and it'll get modified over the next few years.
Do they like wet conditions? Or?
No, they like it dry. They like their feet dry all the time. So in our rock garden mixes that we use in these gardens, it'll be 1 part topsoil, 1 part peat or leaf mold for organic content, and 1 part sand. So fully 1/3 of the mix is drainage material, because alpines do not like to be soggy at all. And that really helps with the frost heaving in the wintertime. If you've got a really moisture retentive soil, as soon as you get the frost, it can push the plants up out of the ground. That's Igor sticks.
Yeah, a lot of those around, I guess.
Oh, well, 200 trees between here and the pond. Well, actually, a week before Easter, people would stand here and ask, where's the pond? Nobody asked us this year. Here we are down at beautiful Oxen Pond. It's about a 10-acre lake, or a pond, and it's right in the middle of our garden. And if you look around the natural area of the botanical garden, encompasses about 110 acres, mostly on the right side of the pond here. But you can see we have lots of ducks. They all look mostly black ducks there now. But we do get sometimes in the fall that can come down here. There can be 150 to 200 ducks down here on the pond, and the kids sure love to see them. Oxen Pond gets its name from back in the late 1700s. Apparently Lieutenant Oxenham and his patrol were carrying a chest of gold to pay the garrison down at Fort Amherst, and he was ambushed here by French troops, and the legend goes he threw the chest of gold out into the pond to save it. And seeing how there's about 10 feet of mud on the bottom of this pond, I don't think anybody's found it since, but that doesn't mean you can come in here and look for it either. So that's where Oxen Pond gets its name. This is our vegetable garden. As you can see, we're growing all our produce in raised beds. There's a bunch of different reasons for this. One is the soil warms up in one of these raised beds much quicker than an in-ground bed. You make your bed small enough. You don't ever have to walk on the soil. You can reach in and weed and harvest from all sides, then you never get that compacting of the soil, which is a great advantage. And in the raised beds, you can jam more stuff into the same space than you can in the ground. Don't ask me why, it just works that way. So we're growing all the normal stuff that people grow in Newfoundland. We got squash and potatoes, radishes, turnip, carrot, beans, cabbage underneath the cover here to keep the cabbage white butterflies off them. 3 different types of lettuce, 4 types of carrots, leeks, garlic, and we're starting to get some decent onions. These are Kelsey Sweet Giants. I grew one about 5 or 6 years ago that was 5 pounds. Haven't been able to do it since. Thought it was wonderful till I read that the world record for an onion of that type is actually 10 pounds 6 ounces. So we're halfway there. But from the looks of things, we're going to get a couple of, like, that's going to be a nice onion. That's going to be a nice onion. And that's going to be a nice onion. So we got a few to look forward to there. This is the garden where we get couples come in here, and the women walk around with their notebooks and you know, taking down plant names and stuff. And you see the guys, they stand here like this going, yes, boy, no, yeah, look at that, look at that. Because like a lot of guys, plant wise, if you can't eat it, they're just not interested in it. So we can grow just a little box. You don't have to grow all these things. You could grow 3 or 4 of these crops in one of these boxes. You know, if you got a little place downtown, or only you got a townhouse in a small backyard, a couple of garden boxes, and you can grow enough for your salad requirements for sure. This little this little garden is again, it's done with raised beds, and it's a dried flower garden that our volunteer group, the Friends of the Garden, look after. So every year the ladies will plant all these different, mostly annuals, that are specifically used for dried flower arrangements. So over the course of the year, they'll harvest them right at the right time, hang them upside down for a couple of weeks to dry them, then you put them together in bunches and sell them up at the field center. I've been doing it for a number of years. It's a great revenue producer, and plus it really looks nice. So we get a couple of different things out of that. This is our garden greenhouse. We have another greenhouse across the road that's in the nursery that's used for all our propagation. So this is more a display greenhouse. And the big showstopper in here, as usual, is the grapes. Bumper crop this year. Now the greenhouse is heated, kept ticking over at about 10 degrees Celsius all winter. So that gives the grapevine a nice early start in the spring. But we keep it pretty well pruned. It needs another little trimming now, but if we didn't prune this 3 or 4 times a year, it would take over the whole greenhouse entirely. So very, very healthy, vigorous plant. In our display case here, we have a number of orchids. And how we became into sort of the orchid business was the Thai ambassador to Canada was visiting the garden and had dinner with one of our board members. And they got talking about plants and the garden and things. And he said, well, I'm an avid orchid collector. I'll send you a couple of orchids. So he sent us a couple of orchids. Then he sent us a couple of more. Then he sent us 30 more. Then he sent us 45 more. So the boss said, well, we got to have somewhere to put them. So built this case, and we display them here over the summer. And then they go across the road to the nursery greenhouse for the fall, for the winter. You can see a lot of these orchids in nature, they would have attached themselves to trees so that the roots aren't in the ground. They take everything they need from the air. And we've got a few other things, a few tomatoes and a few cucumbers. Just something to demonstrate. Yeah, that's Euphorbia crown of thorns, and I'll leave it up to your imagination where it gets the name, but that's apparently what his crown was made of when he was carrying the cross. So that's where the name comes from. It looks painful. Here we are back at the field center, just outside the Garden Cafe, which is our tea room. So if you want a nice soup or sandwich, come in for lunch. Open, I believe, from 11 to 4 every day of the week. And the rest of the garden is open from 10 a.m. to 4:30, 7 days a week, from May 1st to the end of November. So really encourage you all to come up. And everybody's friendly. If you got a question, everybody will stop what they're doing to try and help you. So thanks very much for your time, and we hope to see you at MUN Botanical Garden. Thank you.